Hi friends, I'm Holly from Happy Quilting People. It is a lovely summer day here at my house, and the only reason I actually got dressed and fixed up today was for you guys, because I thought about what's been going on and I've had just kind of an aha moment about low volume fabrics. I wanted to share that with you guys in case you've ever been assigned to get low volume fabrics and you've just thought, I don't feel really sure about that. So I want to tell you a little bit about low volume fabrics. I've got kind of 3 quilt ideas to show you. And what else? And then just talk a little bit about where you can get some. In the course of looking for some low volume fabrics, I thought I might need some more. And so I found some great ones that you can order online, and I'll put the links in the show notes. A little update before we get started. So we have been working on restoring. That sounds like we're doing it like some sort of historically accurate renovation, but we're not. But we are just remodeling an old farmhouse right now. And so we've come to an interesting point. They are working on the hardwood floors. So we're keeping in about half of the house the old hardwood floors. So they had to be sanded and then stained. So this weekend hit right in the middle of all of that, and so there's really nothing we can do in the house, nothing we can do toward getting moved into the house until all of that is finished. So I get to have a few days that have just felt really nice, just to kind of be normal, to be at home, to do some things. So I've been working on a low volume sew along that I've participated in this summer. I want to tell you about that. And first of all, what is a low volume fabric? It's a fabric that has a very neutral background and just a little bit of color to it. So let me show you what low volume is not. A black and white stripe. That would be very bold. Similarly would be Brandon Mabley's shark teeth, which I love as a sashing in a quilt. That would be bold. Even though these are both sort of purpley colors, there's still a big contrast. Lots of visual contrast happening there. Now, here's the black and white stripe. I have this one. I think this is still pretty bold, but if you wanted to use this as a low volume, if you were going sort of browns, beiges, creams, I think that you could with this stripe. So, before this experience of doing a low volume fabric swap and then the sew along, I'll show you kind of where I was at with my low volume stuff. So I bought a pattern and I can't find it. If I find the name of the pattern, I'll put the link, if I can find it, in the show notes for you. Because I looked and looked and I don't know. I think I've shown it to somebody and then tucked it away somewhere different than where I should have stored it. So the pattern that I found was a very neutral background, low volume prints. And I found this one, it's very sort of grayish colored. And I also had these two, also again, very grayish, very kind of dull, boring. I didn't want it to be too scary. And then I found this one, and I think this is like right on the line of being maybe a little too much for some people. It's got a little bits of color in it, but you can see that it would certainly be more interesting as a background. So I think this is a really big key thing for me in my quilts, is that I want the fabrics that I use to be interesting. If you look at my quilt closely, I just don't want it to be a big yawn. I want you to go, oh, look, that block's interesting. I like the fabric that's there. So what you would do is you would take these low volume fabrics, and then you're going to cut out petal shapes from the bright, like Kaffe facets or some Anna Maria Horner fabrics. Make petal shapes and raw edge applique giant petals onto this kind of a background. So this has been where I was in my knowledge about kind of low volume fabrics. So doing this low volume fabric swap was a little bit scary to me. Here's a couple of other colors, a little pink, more organic dot, and then just a buff colored dot. Those could be low volume fabrics. So you can see I was a little scared. The swap comes from Red Rain Boots Handmade. That's her address on all the socials. It's Julia Davis. And so what we started with was she gave us instructions on how to do our fabric swap. Where did my things go? Okay. So she had us cutting 5-inch squares, and then you ship in your 5-inch squares, and then you bring them back. One of her limitations was that they be quilt shop quality fabrics. So that made sure that everybody's getting nice fabric back. And I didn't do too many rounds of the swap because I didn't really know what to expect, but I really liked it. And I would definitely do a swap again. Hers was a very well managed one, and I appreciated all of that. So here are the fabrics that I got back. A little green print. I was thrilled about that one. This was just a white on a white. Not sure that counts as low volume. Here's a small flowers, and then there's also a peach one. Small flowers definitely fall into the category of low volume. Here's a very small dot. It's a little beigey brown kind of a dot. Geometric shapes fall into the category of low volume. Okay, so here's this one. It's a neon pink. I would never have considered that low volume, but it passed the test and got traded into my low volume stuff. Here's a small little beehive print. Some very purpley, mauvey kind of dots. It's just fun to look and see. It was just fun to see what I got because I would have never gotten all of these different fabrics. I knew going in I might not use them all, but it's still fun to see nonetheless. So that was one round of my low volume trades. Here's round 2. I got a pink and red polka dot, fruit. This one's on a creamy background with some blue and purple flowers. Okay, this one is super fun. This one is surfboards. So imagine that you're looking at a quilt block and you find surfboards on a block. You would just be like, oh, that's super fun. I can imagine that lots of things that would qualify as a kid print could have low volume. Here's one that has little sewing things in it. A dot that's in a very geometric pattern. That's a really good one. Little tiny red flowers. This one looks, is it French? Maybe like old journaling, old words to it. It might be French sort of looking. It's a cream background. And then there's one that's gray numbers. And again, from a distance, that's not gonna read as numbers until you get close, and then it'll be interesting. A red dot, something sort of 4th of July, little stars. This one was interesting. It's people exercising. I don't know. And this is a little green, just a little X or a plus, however you think of that. And this one is like a little blinking eyeball, I guess a wide open eyeball. So a whole ton of variety in that. It was just fun, exciting just to get my colors back just to see. And you can see that we sent our fabrics in a very specific way. We labeled it with our Instagram address. And then after we did our swap, again, this is Julia from Red Rain Boots Handmade. She has a couple of quilt patterns that you can download and use for your 5-inch blocks with low volume fabrics. So this quilt that I chose to do from her is called Flutter. Again, it's her pattern, so I don't want to give you too many details, but I did want to show you the block of what it looks like. And she used red corners. So the idea is that this little red bit is your flutter that looks like maybe a little butterfly once it's in the whole quilt. And I just liked her red and I thought it was really cute. So I just grabbed a few of my pre-cuts that came in my little packages. I had crowns, I had mushrooms, and then a green and the red with pink. And so I love a vintage quilt, and I really like the idea of using vintage-esque low volume fabrics. So since I only did 2 rounds of the swap, and I knew that there would be some I didn't really love and didn't want to use, not sure I'm feeling those gymnasts, even though they have the red in them, not necessarily loving them. So I think this lends itself nicely to something that can be toward vintage, even though you're not using a reproduction vintage fabric. So I think this is an interesting style. So I wanted to show you, so I found my red at a quilt shop. I just got a nice deep red, and it doesn't have the maker name on it, and I already forgot who it was. I just remember that I got it at a quilt shop. The first quilt shop I went to really only yielded 2 things that I felt strongly were low volumes and that kind of fit into my sort of retro mode. So I got those 2. This one is green with a little bit of red, so I knew I had that red thing going on. I had a few in my stash. This one I knew was low volume. It's a pale pink, almost like a pattern maker's print. So I felt that that was very low volume. These I think are borderline. I think they're a little bit busy, but when I really looked at Julia's example quilt, it has more busy stuff on it. And it was funner to look at. There was some spots and dots and bigger prints all together. And so I think these will be fun in my quilt because they are retro. Who made these? Do I even remember? If I can find a silage, we'll see. I don't know. If I can find them online, I'll put a link to these. Any of these fabrics that I can. And then the thing that was my aha moment that helped me really wrap my head around low volume fabrics was when I looked at Julia's example quilt online, I thought, oh, these fun fabrics make me think of a fun printed sheet. So imagine that you were just buying a cute little set of sheets. It's got a white cotton background, but it's got some fun little designs printed on it. What would you want those designs to be for the quilt that you're imagining? So for me, thinking about retro and reds, I found some more reds. I thought blues would go with that nicely. Here's a couple of the blues. A yellow that was little chicks. Oh, that's gonna be a great shot of my nails. I need to hide my fingernails. We've been working on this farmhouse. I have not been to a nail salon in a minute. I found 3 fabrics that are probably Christmas fabrics. They've got bells on them. Now, again, from far away, you're just gonna get the little hint of color, and you're really not gonna necessarily think Christmas if you look at those, but I found 3 colorways, a mint, a blue, and a yellow bell. But these are the ones that really particularly reminded me of vintage sheets. If you love the aesthetic of people who are collecting the 1960s and 70s sheets and doing stuff with them, I think this project might be right up your alley. Again, I found this in a 4th of July section at a quilt shop. Another small flower. And then I found a few that were small little birds and animals and insects and things. This was just a lovely little blue printed bird. I liked that the bird was on the branch. This one was a little strawberry. This one's a ladybug. This one's Hometown by Lori Holt. It's another one that makes me think of vintage sheets. Oh, and in the middle of that is one that I feel like also could have been a Christmas fabric. It's got that elongated star, very vintage looking star. Another geometric shape. And this is one that in beige, it has the word stitch. And this one had little books I love to read. That's a Riley Blake fabric. So those are the fabrics that I found. Was really glad about that. The place where I found the bulk of all those fabrics that I just showed you was a quilt store that tends toward very traditional quilt fabrics. If you had to guess what the store owner's favorite color was, you might say it was the very pastel-y spring colors. Like that just tends to be what they have. And they had a big section of these on their design wall. It really took me going to the right store that had a big collection of these, because several of my local quilt stores that I went in just really don't have much low volume stuff in them. And it's certainly not low volumes that fit my aesthetic of looking kind of vintage. And then another quilt that would be fun to do with low volume quilt is a quilt that's called Chopsticks. It is available from sewingparty.com. Again, great use of a low volume background and then colorful images that are the chopsticks lined up, strip pieced there. Another low volume kind of thing that I love and have always loved is newspaper print. I think that would be a really good one, especially if you wanted more of a creamy background or maybe even an old-fashioned sort of look. Something like this would go really good. And Tim Holtz. This one isn't a Tim Holtz, but it makes me think of Tim Holtz fabrics. So that's what I've learned about low volume fabric. I need to be a little more courageous. I need to go beyond just the buff. And for me, I like something that's a little more fun, got a little more color in it, but that still reminds me of a fun set of sheets. And that's where I think I'm gonna end up with a quilt that I really like. You don't have to do the sew along if you want to do the Flutter quilt. It's a quilt pattern that's just downloadable online. Her pattern's very well written. She even has QR codes in it that link to little quick videos that she's got that are tips for her process of making this quilt. It was fast and easy. Where'd my block go? It was fast and easy to put this little block together with the fun little flutter corners. So let me know if you have struggled with low volumes, if you love low volumes, if you have a great source for low volumes, where you like to find them. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you watching. Like and subscribe. If you've got something you want to add to the conversation at the forum at happyquiltypeople.com, we'd love to hear your voice there. Thanks for joining me today, you guys.